What's going on, guys? It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. This one I'm going to be going over every single matchup that's happening on Sunday and then the two games on Monday and going through each player that I think should be started and stated. I'll be pretty much only talking about fantasy relevant players, so if I do happen to ignore a name, please forgive me. If you want any specific questions, maybe you're in super deep leagues, you're welcome to bring them up in the comments, and I'll be happy to give you guys my opinion on those guys. I'll try and focus more on the sort of mid-tier players as well. Obviously, the lineup locks, the top-tier players. You guys are playing them anyway, so it's not helping you out for me to sit here and talk about them and tell you guys that you should start them because you guys already know that. So, really love making these videos. It really helps me sort of help set my lineup, just sort of going matchup by matchup and sort of taking a look at what I'm expecting to happen in each game, and then sort of just helps just sort of predict what I would expect to happen. Really helps sort of gather my thoughts in terms of who I think should be started. If you guys have any specific start-sit questions, you're more than welcome to ask me in the comments. I'd love to help you guys set your lineups as well this week. On Monday morning as well, I'll be going over last-minute injury news as well as last-second start-sit questions. So feel free to hop on the live stream Sunday morning, 1 hour before the first games kick off. It'll be a lot of fun to get as many people in there as possible and sort of help you guys out, and should be a lot of fun. So yeah, with that, let's just get into the first game here. Should be a super exciting week too. So starting us off with the Ravens at the Bengals. For the Ravens, I think you're obviously starting Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. That's assuming Mark Andrews plays. If Mark Andrews doesn't play, I do think you could play Isaiah Likely again, although I wouldn't be super excited about it, but he would be like a low-end tight end one option. Lamar, I know he busted for you guys in week 1, but this game should be a game that requires them to score more on offense. No J.K. Dobbins means they can't lean on the running game as much either. I would expect Lamar to sort of bounce back this week. I'm not going to start any of the Ravens running backs in this one. I sort of want to wait and see what happens there. Zay Flowers would be the only Ravens wide receiver that I'm looking to start, and he'd be a low-end wide receiver 2 for me. He just looks really good. He's going to get a ton of volume, but I will be interested to see just, how involved he is in the offense once Mark Andrews gets back and sort of steals a little bit of that target share. Maybe we'll see Rashad Bateman sort of get worked in a little bit more. So let's pump the brakes a little bit on Zay Flowers, but I still think he's a low-end wide receiver 2 for you guys this week. For the Bengals, it's pretty easy. You're starting Burrow, Chase, Higgins, and Joe Mixon. I know it was a really bad week 1, but I'm not concerned about it until I see it 2 weeks in a row. These Ravens-Bengals games are normally barn burners. We see some very high-scoring games the last couple times they've played, and I really do think we could see a big game from Higgins as well. I do expect him to bounce back. One of my favorite starts this week. Irv Smith is a deep league dart throw at the tight end position if you want to. He was actually relatively involved in the offense, ran a lot of routes, had a decent target share, and he's a decent little player. So if you need to in really deep leagues, you could play Irv Smith, but I would generally just prefer not to. Next up, we've got the Seahawks at the Lions. And this one, I think Geno and Goff are both like low-end streaming options for me. I would prefer to start Jared Goff over Geno. He's at home against the defense that just let Matthew Stafford throw for 350 yards with really no competent wide receivers in the offense. So Jared Goff would be a really good start for you guys if you need to stream the quarterback position. For the Seahawks, I think Ken Walker and DK Metcalf are both pretty much must starts for me. Ken Walker looked to be the clear running back 1 in this backfield. I don't think Zach Charbonnet is really going to start stealing away snaps unless Ken Walker were to get hurt. And DK Metcalf is obviously the wide receiver 1 on this team. Tyler Lockett and JSN are both like low-end flex plays for me. Normally, I'd be more excited about it, but the Seahawks are going to be missing both of their starting offensive tackles. Could be tough for them to sort of protect Geno, and that could mean that we could see a lot of short, close to the line of scrimmage passes, and that just doesn't really bode well for this offense to perform at a high level anyway. For the Lions, it's pretty easy. Amon-Ra, Jahmyr Gibbs, and David Montgomery are all must-starts for me. I think they're all going to have really great weeks, especially Amon-Ra, who we just saw Puka go for like 11 and a 120 last week against the Seahawks defense, and I think it's safe to say Amon-Ra is a better player than Puka Nacua, so really excited about Amon-Ra this week. Outside of that, for the Lions, I think Sam Laporta is a decent streaming option at the tight end position. If you want to play him, you totally can. I think he's probably going to finish as like a low-end tight end 1 this week. Next up, we've got the Colts at the Texans. In this one, I think that Anthony Richardson is actually going to be a top 10 play for you guys. He looked really promising last week. He completed the mid-60% of his passes. He had, I want to say, 12 rush attempts. He actually finished at the quarterback 4 overall. I'm really encouraged by what I saw from Anthony Richardson. I think you should be playing him unless you, for whatever reason, have like a much better option. I think Zach Moss as well for the Colts can be in lineups. He's probably going to get around 20 touches in this game. He is going to be the lead back for the Indianapolis Colts, and he is bad. He's not a very good player, but that volume is going to be enough that I think he's a low-end running back 2 this week. Michael Pittman is the only Colts wide receiver that I'd want to start. I think he's like a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 this week. For the Texans, I think the Dameon Pierce and Nico Collins are the only 2 guys I'm comfortable starting. Pierce obviously had a down week 1, but I think he'll be better this week in a game that the Texans should be more competitive in. I believe they're technically favored to win this game by 1.5 points right now. Nico Collins just looks like he should be in line for a lot of volume in this offense. He is the clear wide receiver 1 right now, and he's definitely the guy that I want to be playing. I would say keep an eye on Tank Dell, though. He's a guy that I'm really excited about. He looked pretty good in week 1. He caught 3 passes. Now Noah Brown is now on IR for the Texans, so that should open up an extra role here. I think you'll see a lot more of Tank Dell in 3 wide receiver sets, and that should be really good for him going forward. I really do think he could be a PPR guy that you can use in the flex down the stretch. Next up, we've got the Bears at the Buccaneers. This one's pretty easy for me. For the Bears, you probably have to start Justin Fields even after the really bad performance he gave you in Week 1. I think TJ Moore is going to be a low-end wide receiver 3, and Herbert's going to be a low-end running back 3. The Buccaneers' run defense is just really tough, so even if Herbert's going to get that volume, it's going to be tough for him to really do much unless he falls in the end zone. DJ Moore, I just don't love it. I've been really worried about the volume for him all season, or all off-season. He'll obviously be better than what he was in Week 1, but I think you're looking at like a low-end wide receiver 3 for most of the season, so not a guy that I feel like you need to start, but you can start him if you have him. Komet for the Bears, I think, can be a streaming option. And then for the Buccaneers, it's pretty easy. You're going to start Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Rachaad White. Rachaad White I don't love, but the Bears' defense is really tough, or really bad, and Rachaad White's going to get a lot of volume, so White's going to be in lineups for you guys this week. And then, obviously, the Bears' defense is just overall really bad. Evans and Godwin have to be in your lineups this week. Next up, we've got the Chiefs at the Jaguars. For the Chiefs, it's pretty simple. Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, absolutely locked into your lineups. Travis Kelce is going to make his season debut this week, and I'm really excited for that. Isaiah Pacheco for the Chiefs is really the only running back that I'd be looking to start. I think he's going to be a low-end running back 2 this week, a guy that you can play if you need to, but you don't have to force into your lineups if you have better options. I'm going to bench every single Chiefs wide receiver this week. I think that maybe you'll see Kadarius Toney potentially have a bounce back this week, and potentially Sky Moore could as well. I'm really concerned that this Chiefs offense is going to be way too centralized on Kelce, and then just sort of dispersed into everywhere else, and it's just not something that I want to be involved in right now. For the Jaguars, there's a lot of really great options here. Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, and Calvin Ridley are all going to be must-starts for you guys. Got to play them every single week at this point. Christian Kirk and Zay Jones, I think, are actually really nice flex options in this one. This should be a really high-scoring game. Christian Kirk is going to be on the field a lot more because they should need to use more 3 wide receiver sets, and I do think Christian Kirk can bounce back as well this week, but Zay Jones is a perfectly fine starter as well. And then Evan Ingram is probably a lock in the starting lineup for you guys at tight end. You probably don't have a better option, and you certainly got a good chance to score in this one, so I'm playing Ingram if I have him. Next, we've got the Packers at the Falcons. For the Packers, I think it's pretty easy. Aaron Jones is the only one that you really feel like you need to force into your lineups. Obviously, he's been dealing with the injury, but if he suits up, you play him. If he ends up sitting for whatever reason, A.J. Dillon's going to be a must-start. With Aaron Jones active, I think A.J. Dillon and Romeo Doubs are like low-end starters for you, low-end starting options, like low-end flex tier guys. Nobody that I feel like I need to start. Romeo Doubs was obviously great last week, but it was the 2 touchdowns. He had like 5 catches for 26 yards. I wouldn't expect the 2 touchdowns to come every single week, so I don't love him in my flex, but he's certainly viable if you need him. Christian Watson is somebody that I'd like to just sit this week and see what happens. He's been dealing with that hamstring injury. It does sound like Christian Watson's going to miss this game, but if he starts, I think I want to sort of just give him the week off in my fantasy lineups and see what happens there. Luke Musgrave can be started a few guys. He looked really good last week. He was really involved. With just a couple minor things breaking right from him, ending up with 2 touchdowns and like 100+ yards last week. So Musgrave's a guy that you can start. Bijan for the Falcons is obviously a must-start. He's the only must-start in this Falcons lineup. He's going to be like a high-end running back 1 most of the season, and you've got to find a way to get him in your lineups every single week. Tyler Algier can also be in the lineups as well, but he's probably like a low-end running back 2, high-end running back 3, or a flex play. You're going to need a touchdown probably for him to pay off, but I think he'll probably see 15-ish touches and should be relatively efficient with them, so you can play Tyler Algier in this one. For the Falcons as well, I'm going to bench Drake London as well as every single other receiver. I'm just really worried about the volume concerns. I don't think Drake London's going to be a reliable option all season. And then Kyle Pitts, I don't love it at all, but you could probably start him. You probably have to, just given that the tight end position sucks in general, so you might as well play someone with upside. But just understand that you're probably going to be dealing with the same sort of crap that you were dealing with all last season as well. Next up, we've got the Raiders at the Bills. For the Raiders, this one's pretty clear as well. Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs are obviously locked into your lineups. It sounds like Jacoby Myers is going to miss this game, so you don't really have to think about starting him. And then Hunter Renfrow would be the guy that you'd see step in for Jacoby Myers in this offense. I'm benching Hunter Renfrow if I have him. He's just not somebody that I'm confident in. He hasn't been great in 2 years at this point, and I'm not going to play him in a tough matchup against the Bills. For the Bills, obviously, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and I think James Cook are going to be lineup locks. James Cook just looked way too involved last week, was an involved pass catcher, didn't score, and was still decent for fantasy. He's a guy that I think is going to be forcing his way into lineups pretty much every single week. Gabe Davis, I think, actually has a big week in this one. I'm expecting him to score a touchdown, probably break loose for a big one at some point in this game, and he's a guy that I do want to be starting in my flex spot. And then Dalton Kincaid, I think, is going to have a nice week as well. He's a guy that you can play and stream at your tight end position. Next, we've got the Chargers at the Titans. For the Chargers, I think this entire passing attack is something that I want a piece of. I think Justin Herbert's going to have a great bounce-back game along with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. The Titans are just a crazy pass funnel. They've got a really great run defense and really poor secondary. We just saw this New Orleans Saints throw for over 300 yards against them. Justin Herbert's due for a huge week in this one. You're obviously going to start Herbert, Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams. I think you can start Gerald Everett as a streaming option as well if you want to. I wouldn't really start Joshua Palmer or Quentin Johnston just yet, though. For the Chargers running backs, Austin Eckler is currently listed as doubtful. He hasn't practiced at all this week, so I would expect Austin Eckler to miss this one. That makes Joshua Kelly like a low-end running back 2 for me. He's probably not going to be very efficient on the ground. Like I said earlier, the Titans' run defense is great, but he's going to have plenty of opportunity to score in what I expect to be a game where the Chargers score a lot of points, so Joshua Kelly can be started for you guys if you need to. Derrick Henry for the Titans is obviously the only must-start. He's a guy that's going to see 18 to 20 touches probably, and the Chargers' run defense isn't great, so it's something that I'd be excited about starting. DeAndre Hopkins sounds like he could miss this game. If he were to miss this game, I think Treylon Burks becomes a low-end flex option. If Hopkins plays, he's like a low-end wide receiver 3 for me, just given that I'd be worried about a potential snap count there. As well for the Titans, I think Chig Okonkwo is in streaming consideration as well, especially if DeAndre Hopkins misses this game. I think Chig Okonkwo is certainly a guy that you can stream at the tight end spot. Next, we've got the 49ers at the Rams. This one's pretty easy, actually. For the 49ers, you guys know who you're starting. You're starting that big four of CMC, Ayuk, Debo, and Kittle. All four of those guys are probably in starting lineups every single week this year. For the Rams, if Puka Nacua plays, I think he's a low-end wide receiver 3 for me. You can play him, but he's not a must-start. But honestly, if you picked him off waivers, you probably spent a bit of fab on him. You're probably looking to start him here. For the Rams as well, I think Tyler Higbee is in streaming consideration, but he obviously let us down last week. I don't think he's got a very high ceiling here, but the floor is pretty safe. You should see at least 3 receptions in every game this year and be a guy that you can play if you need to. For the Rams running backs, I think Kyren Williams is like a low-end running back 2 for me, and Cam Akers being a low-end running back 3. I just have Williams ranked a little bit higher because he should be a more involved pass catcher, and both of them probably need a touchdown to really pay off, but Kyren is not going to completely destroy you if he doesn't fall in the end zone. Outside of that, for the Rams, I think you could look at Tutu Atwell or Van Jefferson, but I really don't want to start those guys unless I'm in super deep leagues. Pretty much avoiding the entire Rams pass catching options outside of Puka, and the Rams backfield is also a mess. I'm not super excited about any of it. So if you really want to just sit every single Ram, I really think you can. Next, we've got the Giants at the Cardinals. For the Giants, I think Daniel Jones could be used as a quarterback streaming option. I don't love it. Obviously, he had a really poor week 1. We don't really know who their pass catchers are going to be outside of Waller and Saquon. So if you just want to wait it, I'd probably sit it out as well. But if you're really, really desperate, you can play Daniel Jones in this one. Outside of Daniel Jones, Saquon and Darren Waller are both going to be locks for your lineup. They're going to have really great weeks this week. I'm a little bit concerned with the hamstring injury Waller has been dealing with, but as long as he's playing, given the state of the tight end position, you're probably going to start Waller. For the Cardinals, James Conner is going to be like a low-end running back 2 pretty much every single week. He'll have some touchdown upside as well over the course of the season. He's just a good player that's going to be given a lot of volume. You're probably starting James Conner every single week. And then Marquise Brown's like a really low-end flex play for me. Obviously, he could perform well, but this quarterback room just looks really bad for Arizona. Joshua Dobbs doesn't seem like he can get it done, really, and I'm honestly scared about playing Marquise Brown. I have him in a league that I am pretty much staring down between Marquise Brown and Kendrick Bourne, and I sort of feel like I'm going to end up going towards Kendrick Bourne when it's all said and done. So I don't love that by any means, but that sort of gives you the sort of gauge for where I view Marquise Brown right now. Next, we've got the Jets at the Cowboys, and what hopefully was going to be a more exciting game than it turns out it's going to be, given that now Aaron Rodgers has got his torn Achilles. For the Jets, Brees and Dalvin Cook are both going to be like low-end running back 2s flex plays. It sounds like Brees Hall is going to remain on a snap count for the next couple weeks, and that means that he's obviously the more explosive player. He could have a nice, big, huge home run that just really makes him a high-end play, but you're banking on some efficiency for Brees Hall. Dalvin Cook should volume his way to being like startable, but not somebody that I'm super excited about. Garrett Wilson's going to be like a low-end to mid-tier wide receiver 3 for me. Just not a guy that I'm super excited about. His splits with and without Zach Wilson are pretty staggering. He's just not a guy that's been able to perform with Zach Wilson at quarterback, and honestly, nobody can really perform well with Zach Wilson at quarterback, so I'd be concerned about it, but obviously with where you drafted Garrett Wilson, he's probably going to be in your starting lineups. For the Cowboys, Tony Pollard and CeeDee Lamb are must-starts every single week. Obviously, it's a tough matchup. I think this could be a low-scoring game, but you got to start those guys. They're studs on a good offense. Outside of that, I don't really want to start any Cowboys. Brandon Cooks sounds like he's going to miss this game with an injury. Michael Gallup isn't good enough to slot into a wide receiver 2 role and be meaningful against the Jets defense. And the only other guy that I want to keep an eye on here is going to be Jake Ferguson. He saw a lot of targets last week. I believe he had 7 targets. He's going to be involved in this offense for the Cowboys. I don't want to start him this week, but he's a guy that you can keep an eye on and see if he's potentially going to develop into that Dalton Schultz role over the back half of the season. Next up, we've got the Commanders at the Broncos. For the Commanders, I think Brian Robinson's going to be a nice running back 2 option for you guys. I'm becoming more and more bullish on him. He's just a guy that's going to get 18 to 20 touches a week, it sounds like. He actually ran a lot of routes. He was involved as a pass catcher, and he's going to be given the goal line work as well. So he's a guy that I think you can play, even though it's not a great matchup. Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson are going to be like flex options for me this week. I do lean Jahan Dotson over Terry McLaurin in this one. Patrick Surtain tends to shadow the number 1 wide receiver for the opposing team, and that opens up a lot of opportunity for the number 2 wide receiver in the offense. So given that I would expect McLaurin to be viewed as that number 1, Dotson should be the guy that can benefit. We just saw Jacoby Myers have a huge game against the Broncos last week. Sutton for the Broncos is going to be like a wide receiver 3 option. I'm not super excited about it, but he did score last week. He's clearly the wide receiver 1 in this offense, and Jerry Jeudy sounds like he'll play but be on a snap count, and that does mean that Sutton should be the wide receiver 1 again for this team. He's a decent player. Russ actually looked pretty good in week 1. I think this Broncos offense could be middle of the pack, not too bad, and I think it'll be okay for them this season. So you can play Sutton here if you need to. Javonte for me is going to be a running back 2 option, and P-Ryan's like a low-end flex option. You're hoping these fall in the end zone. I would obviously prefer Javonte over P-Ryan, but you can play both of them, especially in PPR formats. And then with Jeudy, I'm sitting him even if he plays. I just don't want to play a player that I know is going to be on a snap count. Obviously, Jeudy could catch a 60-yard touchdown at some point, and then he looks like a great play, but I'm just going to weight that risk there. Unless I have really poor options elsewhere, I'm probably leaving Jeudy on the bench this week. Next, we've got the Dolphins at the Patriots. It'll be really interesting in this one to see what the Dolphins' offense truly is. Obviously, the Chargers' defense isn't nearly as good as the Patriots, so we'll see if the Dolphins' offense is as high octane this week as it was the week before. Despite that, I think Tua, Tyreek, and Jalen Waddle are all going to be must-starts for me. I can't imagine sitting Tua in a matchup where he just came off of like 450 passing yards, so Tua's going to be in your starting lineup. Raheem Mostert's a low-end running back 2 for me. Despite how good this Dolphins' offense was in week 1, we only saw Mostert get 12 carries. You probably do need a touchdown for Mostert to pay off, but the Dolphins' offense is a good one. He could certainly find the end zone this week. Hunter Henry for the Patriots is a really great streaming option. I really do think he could be a guy that honestly ends up being top 5 at the position again this week. He's obviously their most talented tight end option. He's probably going to lead the team in receiving touchdowns. Ramondre Stevenson is going to be a high-end running back 2. I know it wasn't great last week, but the Eagles' defense is great against the run. We just saw what they did against Alexander Mattison in Minnesota. I'm not worried about him at all. He's a really talented player. He's going to catch a lot of passes, and the Patriots are probably going to need to score points to keep up with the Dolphins in this one. Outside of that, I think Kendrick Bourne can be started in the flex spot if you need to. I don't love it, but if Devontae Parker does miss this game, I think Kendrick Bourne's like a low-end flex play, and in PPR formats, I think he can be started for you guys, but I'm not going to start any other Patriots pass catcher here. On to the Monday night games, the first one in the weird doubleheader that they do where they overlap the games by like 2 hours. The Saints at the Panthers in this one. Chris Olave is obviously going to be a must start. J.C. Horn, the number 1 cornerback for the Carolina Panthers, just went on IR. He's going to miss the next 4 weeks, and that means Olave is just going to absolutely run wild. I expect big things out of Chris Olave this week. Michael Thomas and Rashid Shaheed are both like low-end wide receiver 3s or flex options. I'd prefer Michael Thomas over Shaheed, but Shaheed's a really good player, actually. I do like his development. I think he's going to be a guy that could be honestly startable in most weeks this season, and I'm interested to see how that wide receiver room develops, because I'd be worried if I'm a Michael Thomas owner that Shaheed could potentially take over there. Miles Sanders for the Panthers is a lock for your guys' lineups. The volume was there last week. He's involved as a pass catcher. He's going to fall in the end zone every now and then as well. You got to start Miles Sanders. Hayden Hurst for the Panthers can be streamed. He was really involved as a pass catcher for the Panthers. I do think he's going to be probably Bryce Young's favorite target this season. And outside of that, I'm going to bench every single running back for the Saints. Jamal Williams just couldn't really get it going last week. Kendre Miller sounds like he's going to return to action this week. So Jamal Williams will need to be really lucky and fall in the end zone. And obviously he can do that, but it's just not something that I want to bet on. For the Panthers, I'm going to bench all of their wide receivers. Nobody really stood out. Adam Thielen had a really bad week. We saw Terrace Marshall lead the wide receiver room in targets last week. It's just not something that I want to mess around with. I'm going to bench all those wide receivers here. And last, we've got the Browns at the Steelers. It'll be really interesting to see what this Browns defense truly is and sort of what the Steelers offense really is, but it doesn't really get any better for the Steelers offense going up against the Browns defense that really just shut out Cincinnati. For the Browns, I think Nick Chubb and Amari Cooper are going to be must-starts for you guys. Nick Chubb and Amari Cooper are probably must-starts in almost any single matchup this season. Deshaun Watson and David Njoku are probably starting options for you guys as well, both like low-end quarterback and tight end ones, but guys that you can start if you need to. Elijah Moore would be like a low-end flex play. He did look really involved last week, and it was just a really weird game. It's not something that I would have expected a lot of offense to be produced in, but with how involved Elijah Moore is, I do think he could develop into a nice flex play. I would still prefer to wait a week on Elijah Moore this season, but if you need to play him, you certainly can. For the Steelers, Najee's like a really low-end running back too. You're banking on him falling in the end zone or catching a few passes, and it'll be interesting to see what happens there, but obviously the volume really wasn't there for him last week. Pat Freiermuth is a low-end tight end 1 just again because of how bad the tight end position is, and then for the Steelers outside of that, I think George Pickens is a decent flex option, but I really don't want to play him. Allen Robinson could see some targets and be useful in PPR formats, but I think in general, I don't really feel excited about starting any Steelers, and if I'm going to start one, it's Najee, and I'm just hoping for volume. So that'll do it for the matchup breakdown. I've gone through every single game, and if there's anything that I didn't mention, any player that I didn't touch on enough, or any specific start-sit questions you guys have, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'll be sure to get back to you guys and help you guys get those lineups set for week 2. Sunday morning, 1 hour before kickoff for the first games, I'll be doing my live stream. I'll be going over all the latest injury updates, and I can go through any start-sit questions you guys might have. So really fun doing that, really fun sort of doing as much as I can to help you guys out right before kickoff, and then we'll be right into week 2. So if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do. That way you'll get access to the videos we're putting out every single week. Doing 4 videos and a live stream every single week at this point. We're going to be here all season to help you guys win your leagues, and really want to be able to help as many people as possible. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like this video if you haven't as well. It really helps the channel. It really helps me know that I'm doing a good job and helps me know that you guys want more content like this. So yeah, I want to thank you guys so much, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.